I spent my entire retirement savings, $50,000, secretly planning my son's dream wedding, only to discover I wasn't even invited to the ceremony. But when I found out who was really behind excluding me from the guest list, I made a decision that changed everything, forever so. Was I wrong to cancel every single thing I had paid for just 2 weeks before their big day? My heart pounds with excitement as I hang up the phone after talking to Jake. At 72 years old, I thought my days of planning big celebrations were over. But here I am, about to give my only son the wedding of his dreams. The house feels too quiet after our conversation, just like it has for the past 5 years since his father passed away. Jake's voice carried such joy when he told me about proposing to Serafina, but I could hear the worry underneath when he mentioned keeping everything small and simple. I walk to my bedroom and pull out the wooden box where I keep all my important papers. Inside, nestled between insurance documents and old photos, is my savings account statement. $50,000. Not a fortune, but enough to make magic happen. I earned every penny working double shifts at the hospital after my husband died, saving for retirement that never seems to come. But what good is money sitting in a bank when your child needs help making their dreams come true? The next morning, I drive to the fanciest part of town where all the wedding planners have their offices. Margaret Cho's boutique sits between a jewelry store and an art gallery, with huge windows displaying the most beautiful flower arrangements I've ever seen. When I walk inside, soft music plays overhead, and everything smells like roses and vanilla. A young woman with perfect makeup greets me at the front desk, looking me up and down like she's trying to figure out if I can afford to be here. Margaret herself appears a few minutes later, tall and elegant, in a way that makes me feel suddenly aware of my worn purse and comfortable shoes. But when I explain what I want to do for Jake, her whole face lights up with genuine enthusiasm. We spend 3 hours looking at photos, discussing venues, and planning every detail. She shows me pictures of lakeside ceremonies and garden receptions that look like they belong in fairy tales. When I hand her the deposit check, my hand barely shakes at all. Over the next few weeks, I throw myself into wedding planning with an energy I haven't felt in years. Margaret and I meet twice a week, sometimes at her office, sometimes at potential venues. We visit the Riverside Manor, where swans glide across a perfect lake and ancient oak trees provide natural arches for ceremonies. The manager shows us around personally, pointing out where the string quartet would set up and how the photography would look during golden hour. When Margaret negotiates the price down from $8,000 to $6,500, I feel like we're partners in creating something beautiful. I spend hours researching everything Jake has ever mentioned liking. He once said he loved hearing string quartets at his college graduation, so I book the best one in the city. Serafina posted pictures of white roses and baby's breath on social media last year, so I order 300 stems for the ceremony and reception. I even call the little bed and breakfast where they plan to honeymoon and upgrade their reservation to the luxury suite with a private balcony overlooking the mountains. Every vendor I work with comments on how lucky Jake is to have a mother who cares so much. The florist, Mrs. Patterson, tells me about her own son's wedding and how she wished she could have done more to help. The photographer, a young man named David, shows me his portfolio and promises to capture every moment of joy. When I write each check, I imagine Jake's face when he sees what we've created together. The money flows out of my account steadily, but my heart fills up with purpose and anticipation. 3 months pass in a blur of tastings, fittings, and final arrangements. I've coordinated with caterers who specialize in Jake's favorite foods, booked transportation for the wedding party, and even arranged for rose petals to be scattered along the ceremony aisle. Margaret assures me that everything is perfect, that Jake and Serafina will be amazed by what we've accomplished. But as the weeks go by, I notice Jake mentions the wedding less and less during our phone calls. When I ask about dress fittings or venue visits, he changes the subject quickly. A small worry begins to grow in my chest, but I push it away. Jake has always been private about important things, just like his father was. He's probably just overwhelmed with all the normal stress that comes with getting married. I tell myself that's why he sounds distant lately, why our conversations feel shorter and more strained. But late at night, when I'm alone in my empty house, I wonder if I should have asked more questions before diving into this massive surprise. The grocery bags feel heavier than usual as I climb the stairs to Jake's apartment building. I've brought ingredients for his favorite meal, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the same recipe his grandmother taught me when I was a young bride. It's been 3 weeks since we last talked, and I can't shake the feeling that something is wrong. As his mother, I know when my son is hiding something from me, and lately, every conversation feels like he's reading from a script. I knock on the familiar door, balancing the grocery bags against my hip. When Serafina opens it, her face goes through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, and something that looks almost like panic. She's wearing an expensive-looking dress I've never seen before, and her hair is styled in a way that suggests she was going somewhere important. Behind her, I can hear Jake's voice talking rapidly, though I can't make out the words. "Mrs. Kang." Serafina's voice is too bright, too cheerful. "We weren't expecting you today. Jake didn't mention you were coming over." She doesn't invite me in right away, instead standing in the doorway like a guard protecting something valuable. Over her shoulder, I catch a glimpse of Jake hunched over his laptop, frantically clicking and typing. The apartment looks different somehow, more formal, more organized than usual, like they're preparing for something important. When I finally get inside, I notice wedding magazines scattered across their coffee table, but they're not the elegant bridal publications Margaret and I have been studying. These are budget guides, with headlines like "Beautiful Weddings for Under 5,000" and "DIY Decorations That Look Expensive." My heart starts beating faster as I realize these magazines don't match anything we've been planning. The color schemes are different, the venues are smaller, and everything looks much more modest than the lakeside ceremony we've been organizing. Jake finally looks up from his computer, and his face is pale in a way that reminds me of when he used to get caught in childhood lies. "Hey, Mom, what brings you by?" His voice sounds strained, like he's fighting off a cold or trying not to cry. I set the grocery bags down on their kitchen counter and really look at my son for the first time in weeks. He's lost weight, and there are dark circles under his eyes that suggest he hasn't been sleeping well. "I brought ingredients for pot roast," I say, trying to keep my voice light and normal. "I thought we could cook together and talk about wedding plans. It's getting close to spring, and there are still so many details to finalize." The silence that follows my words is so thick I can almost touch it. Jake and Serafina exchange a look that excludes me completely. One of those wordless conversations that couples have when they're sharing secrets. Serafina clears her throat and sits down across from me, her hands folded in her lap like she's about to deliver bad news. "Mrs. Kang, we need to discuss something important about the wedding plans." Her voice has changed from fake cheerfulness to cold formality, the way people talk when they're about to end relationships or fire employees. "Jake and I have been doing a lot of thinking, and we've decided to make some changes to our original plans." My mouth goes dry as I wait for her to continue. Jake won't look at me directly, instead staring at his hands like they hold the answers to questions I don't even know he's asking. "What kind of changes?" I manage to ask, though part of me already knows I don't want to hear the answer. The wedding magazines on their table seem to mock me. Their budget-friendly advice, a stark contrast to the thousands of dollars I've already spent on their behalf. "We've decided to have a much smaller ceremony," Serafina continues, her voice growing stronger as she speaks. "Just immediate family and our closest friends. We want something intimate and personal, not a big production that makes us uncomfortable." The words hit me like physical blows, each one landing in my chest and making it harder to breathe. Immediate family, doesn't that include me? Haven't I always been immediate family to Jake? Before I can ask the question that's burning in my throat, Serafina adds the words that make my world tilt sideways. "We hope you'll understand that this decision is what's best for everyone involved. We want our wedding day to be about us and the people who have truly supported our relationship from the very beginning." The emphasis she places on truly supported makes it clear that I'm not included in that category, though I can't understand why. I look at Jake, silently begging him to explain what's happening, to tell me this is all a misunderstanding. But he just sits there, shoulders hunched, looking like a stranger wearing my son's face. The apartment around us feels hostile now, filled with secrets and decisions that were made without me. The grocery bags on the counter seem ridiculous suddenly. Who was I to think I could just show up and cook dinner like nothing had changed? I drive home from Jake's apartment in complete shock, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles have turned white. The traffic lights blur together as tears fill my eyes, and I have to pull over twice just to catch my breath. How could my own son sit there and let his fiancée tell me I'm not truly supportive of their relationship? After 32 years of raising him alone, working extra shifts to pay for his college, celebrating every achievement and comforting him through every heartbreak, how am I suddenly not family enough to witness his wedding? Once I'm safely home, I sit in my car for 10 minutes before I can bring myself to go inside. The house feels different now, like a place where foolish old women live alone and make assumptions about love that don't exist. I go straight to my kitchen table where I keep all my important papers and pull out the thick folder labeled Jake's Wedding. Inside are contracts, receipts, vendor agreements, and dozens of notes written in my careful handwriting. $50,000 worth of dreams and plans, all based on the belief that I was helping my son start his new life. My hands shake as I dial Margaret's number. She answers on the second ring, her voice warm and professional as always. Mrs. Kang, perfect timing. I just got confirmation from the florist about the rose arrangements. Everything is going to be absolutely stunning. The cheerfulness in her voice makes what I have to say even harder. I take a deep breath and force myself to speak clearly. Margaret, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to be completely honest with me. The pause that follows tells me everything I need to know before she even speaks. When Margaret finally responds, her voice has lost all its professional polish. Mrs. Kang, I was hoping you would call. We received some very concerning communications yesterday, and I wasn't sure how to handle the situation. My heart sinks deeper into my chest as she continues. A woman named Serafina Miller contacted our office. She claimed to be the bride and said there had been some kind of misunderstanding about the wedding arrangements. I close my eyes and lean back in my kitchen chair, the same chair where I used to help Jake with his homework and listen to his problems. What exactly did she say, Margaret? The silence stretches between us, filled with the kind of awkwardness that comes when someone has to deliver news that will hurt. She said that you had been making wedding plans without their knowledge or permission. She insisted that they never asked for such an elaborate ceremony and that they were embarrassed by the whole situation. The word embarrassed hits me like a slap across the face. Embarrassed by my love, embarrassed by my generosity, embarrassed by the mother who wanted to give them something beautiful. Margaret continues talking, but her words sound distant and hollow. She also mentioned that they had been planning their own ceremony for next week. Next week, Mrs. Kang. And that your involvement had caused them significant stress and confusion. Next week. While I've been planning a spring wedding for months, they've been secretly organizing their own ceremony for next week. The betrayal cuts so deep I can barely breathe. Did she say anything else? I managed to whisper into the phone. Margaret's voice becomes even more gentle, the way people talk when they're delivering news about terminal illnesses. She requested that we cancel all arrangements immediately and refund any payments. When I explained that you were the client and had paid for everything, she became quite agitated. Before I can ask the question that's burning in my throat, Serafina adds the words that make my world tilt sideways. We hope you'll understand that this decision is what's best for everyone involved. We want our wedding day to be about us and the people who have truly supported our relationship from the very beginning. The emphasis she places on truly supported makes it clear that I'm not included in that category, though I can't understand why. I look at Jake, silently begging him to explain what's happening, to tell me this is all a misunderstanding. But he just sits there, shoulders hunched, looking like a stranger wearing my son's face. The apartment around us feels hostile now, filled with secrets and decisions that were made without me. The grocery bags on the counter seem ridiculous suddenly. Who was I to think I could just show up and cook dinner like nothing had changed? I drive home from Jake's apartment in complete shock, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles have turned white. The traffic lights blur together as tears fill my eyes, and I have to pull over twice just to catch my breath. How could my own son sit there and let his fiancée tell me I'm not truly supportive of their relationship? After 32 years of raising him alone, working extra shifts to pay for his college, celebrating every achievement and comforting him through every heartbreak, how am I suddenly not family enough to witness his wedding? Once I'm safely home, I sit in my car for 10 minutes before I can bring myself to go inside. The house feels different now, like a place where foolish old women live alone and make assumptions about love that don't exist. I go straight to my kitchen table where I keep all my important papers and pull out the thick folder labeled Jake's Wedding. Inside are contracts, receipts, vendor agreements, and dozens of notes written in my careful handwriting. $50,000 worth of dreams and plans, all based on the belief that I was helping my son start his new life. My hands shake as I dial Margaret's number. She answers on the second ring, her voice warm and professional as always. Mrs. Kang, perfect timing. I just got confirmation from the florist about the rose arrangements. Everything is going to be absolutely stunning. The cheerfulness in her voice makes what I have to say even harder. I take a deep breath and force myself to speak clearly. Margaret, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to be completely honest with me. The pause that follows tells me everything I need to know before she even speaks. When Margaret finally responds, her voice has lost all its professional polish. Mrs. Kang, I was hoping you would call. We received some very concerning communications yesterday, and I wasn't sure how to handle the situation. My heart sinks deeper into my chest as she continues. A woman named Serafina Miller contacted our office. She claimed to be the bride and said there had been some kind of misunderstanding about the wedding arrangements. I close my eyes and lean back in my kitchen chair, the same chair where I used to help Jake with his homework and listen to his problems. What exactly did she say, Margaret? The silence stretches between us, filled with the kind of awkwardness that comes when someone has to deliver news that will hurt. She said that you had been making wedding plans without their knowledge or permission. She insisted that they never asked for such an elaborate ceremony and that they were embarrassed by the whole situation. The word embarrassed hits me like a slap across the face. Embarrassed by my love, embarrassed by my generosity, embarrassed by the mother who wanted to give them something beautiful. Margaret continues talking, but her words sound distant and hollow. She also mentioned that they had been planning their own ceremony for next week. Next week, Mrs. Kang. And that your involvement had caused them significant stress and confusion. Next week. While I've been planning a spring wedding for months, they've been secretly organizing their own ceremony for next week. The betrayal cuts so deep I can barely breathe. Did she say anything else? I managed to whisper into the phone. Margaret's voice becomes even more gentle, the way people talk when they're delivering news about terminal illnesses. She requested that we cancel all arrangements immediately and refund any payments. When I explained that you were the client and had paid for everything, she became quite agitated. After I hang up with Margaret, I sit in my empty kitchen surrounded by wedding planning materials that now feel like evidence of my own foolishness. The vendor contracts mock me with their promises of beauty and celebration. The menu selections remind me of how carefully I chose Jake's favorite foods. The seating chart I'd started working on shows my lonely handwriting, trying to arrange people who apparently don't want me there. But as I sit there feeling sorry for myself, something else begins to grow in my chest, something harder and more determined than grief. I've spent months researching vendors, comparing prices, negotiating contracts, and managing every detail of this wedding. I've learned more about event planning in the past few months than I ever thought possible. If Jake and Serafina want to exclude me from their lives, that's their choice to make. But they don't get to exclude me and keep my money too. I pull out my laptop and start making a list. Every vendor needs to be contacted. Every contract needs to be reviewed for cancellation policies. Every arrangement needs to be undone with the same careful attention I used to create it. The Riverside Manor, the string quartet, the florist, the photographer, the caterer, the transportation company, they all need to know that the Kang Miller wedding is no longer happening as planned. As I work through the night, calling vendors and explaining the situation, I discover something interesting. Most of them are sympathetic to my position, and several mention that they've dealt with similar family drama before. The venue manager at Riverside Manor is particularly understanding, agreeing to refund 80% of my deposit, even though their contract only requires 50%. The string quartet leader actually sounds angry on my behalf, saying that excluding the person who paid for the wedding is the most ungrateful thing she's ever heard. By 3 in the morning, I've cancelled or modified every single arrangement I made for Jake's wedding. Some vendors will keep small cancellation fees, but most of my money will be returned within 30 days. The upgraded honeymoon reservation was the easiest to cancel. Apparently, luxury resorts deal with family disputes all the time. As I close my laptop and prepare for bed, I realize that tomorrow I need to have a conversation with Jake and Serafina that will either repair our relationship or end it completely. But first, I need to understand exactly what they've been planning behind my back and why they felt the need to lie to me for months about their real intentions. I wake up after only 3 hours of sleep, but my mind is clearer than it's been in weeks. Instead of rushing over to Jake's apartment in an emotional state, I decide to do something I should have done months ago. I'm going to find out exactly what kind of wedding they've been planning without me. If Serafina told Margaret they were having a ceremony next week, there must be evidence of their real plans somewhere online or in public records. I start with social media, something I rarely use but understand well enough to do basic searches. Serafina's Instagram account is set to private, but her Facebook page shows recent activity that makes my blood run cold. 3 days ago, she posted a photo of herself in a wedding dress with the caption, "Final fitting complete. Can't wait for Saturday." Saturday. That's only 4 days away. The post has dozens of comments from friends and family members congratulating her and saying they can't wait to celebrate with her. I scroll through the comments, looking for names I recognize, but I don't see any of Jake's friends or family members responding. It's like they've created a completely separate world where I don't exist. One comment from someone named Ashley says, "So glad you decided to keep it small and intimate. Those big fancy weddings are so overdone anyway." Another person writes, "Your mum must be so excited to finally see you get married." But there's no mention of Jake's family anywhere. Next, I check the public records for marriage licenses in our county. It takes some digging through the courthouse website, but I finally find it, Jacob Kang and Serafina Miller, license issued 2 weeks ago. Ceremony scheduled for this Saturday at 2 p.m. at the Riverside Community Center. The same community center where Jake played basketball in high school. The same place where we used to attend church potluck dinners. It's a perfectly nice venue, but it's nothing like the Lakeside Manor where I thought they were getting married. Armed with this information, I drive to Jake's apartment building with a new sense of purpose. This time, I don't bring groceries or gifts. I bring printed copies of everything I've discovered, the marriage license, the social media posts, the vendor cancellation confirmations, and a detailed breakdown of every penny I spent on their behalf. If they want to have an adult conversation about their wedding plans, then we're going to have one based on facts, not feelings. I knock on their door at exactly 10 in the morning, knowing they'll both be home since Jake doesn't work on Thursdays and Serafina's teaching schedule ends early. When Jake opens the door, he looks surprised but not particularly happy to see me. "Mom, we weren't expecting you again so soon." His voice has that careful tone people use when they're trying to avoid conflict. But I'm past the point of being managed or handled. "We need to talk." I say, walking past him into the apartment before he can object. Serafina is sitting at their kitchen table with wedding planning materials spread out in front of her, budget spreadsheets, DIY decoration instructions, and a handwritten guest list that I can see from across the room. She looks up at me with an expression that's part guilt and part defiance, like a teenager caught breaking curfew. I set my folder of documents on their coffee table and sit down across from both of them. Before we have this conversation, I want you both to know that I've cancelled every single wedding arrangement I made. The venue, the flowers, the music, the upgraded honeymoon, all of it is gone. You'll get exactly the wedding you planned for. Nothing more and nothing less. Jake's face goes white, and Serafina's mouth falls open in shock. You cancelled everything? Jake's voice cracks like he's 13 years old again. Mom, we didn't ask you to do that. We just wanted to have a smaller ceremony. I pull out the marriage license printout and place it on the table between us. A smaller ceremony this Saturday at the community centre? The ceremony you've been planning for weeks without telling me? The ceremony I found out about by looking up public records because my own son stopped talking to me about his wedding. Serafina finally finds her voice, and it's sharp with defensive anger. We had every right to plan our own wedding the way we wanted it. You were steamrolling over our wishes and making decisions without asking us what we actually wanted. Her words carry the tone of someone who's been practicing this argument, who's convinced herself that she's the victim in this situation. I look directly at her, no longer trying to be the diplomatic future mother-in-law. Serafina, what I was doing was called generosity. What you've been doing is called deception. There's a difference between making your own choices and lying to people who love you. Jake tries to interrupt, but I hold up my hand to stop him. Jake, I raised you better than this. I taught you that honesty matters, that family matters, and that you don't take advantage of people who sacrifice for you. The room fills with tense silence as they both struggle to find responses that don't make them look like the ungrateful people they've become. Finally, Serafina stands up, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. You're trying to buy your way into our lives, Mrs. Kang. We don't owe you a place at our wedding just because you spent money we never asked you to spend. Her words hang in the air like a challenge, daring me to escalate this conflict to its breaking point. But instead of getting angry, I feel a strange sense of calm wash over me. I've spent months trying to earn a place in their lives through generosity and sacrifice, but I've finally learned something important. Love can't be bought, but it also can't be faked. And what I'm seeing in this apartment right now isn't love, it's selfishness wearing the mask of independence. I stand up slowly from their couch, gathering my papers with the same careful precision I used to organize their dream wedding. The silence in the apartment is so thick it feels like trying to breathe underwater, but I'm no longer the desperate mother begging for inclusion. Something fundamental has shifted inside me, and I can see this situation clearly for the first time in months. Jake and Serafina watch me nervously, probably expecting tears or pleading, but instead they're getting something they never anticipated. Consequences. You're absolutely right, Serafina, I say, my voice steady and calm. You don't owe me anything just because I spent money on your behalf. But that also means I don't owe you anything just because you're marrying my son. I pull out my phone and show them the screen displaying my bank account. $47,000 has been refunded to my account as of this morning. The remaining $3,000 was kept by vendors as cancellation fees, which I consider a small price to pay for learning who you both really are. Jake's face crumbles as he realizes the full scope of what they've lost. Mom, those cancellation fees, that's money you'll never get back. We never wanted you to lose money because of us. His voice carries genuine regret, but it's too little and far too late. I can see him mentally calculating everything they gave up. The lakeside venue with swans, the professional string quartet, the luxury honeymoon suite, the 3-course dinner instead of community center sandwiches. Jake, This conversation isn't about money anymore. It's about respect, honesty, and family loyalty. You chose to lie to me for months about your real wedding plans. You chose to let your fiancé exclude me from the most important day of your life. You chose to take my sacrifice for granted while planning a completely different ceremony behind my back. Each word hits him like a physical blow, and I can see the boy I raised struggling to understand how badly he's handled this situation. Serafina, however, doubles down on her defensive anger. We're adults, Mrs. Kang. We have the right to make our own decisions about our wedding without interference from anyone, including family members who think money gives them control over our choices. Her voice rises with each word, and I can see the entitled attitude that probably convinced Jake to go along with this deception in the first place. Control? I laugh, but there's no humor in the sound. Serafina, let me tell you what control actually looks like. Control is systematically excluding your future husband's mother from wedding planning while accepting her financial support through a third party. Control is manipulating someone into keeping secrets from the person who raised him. Control is calling a wedding planner to cancel arrangements paid for with someone else's retirement savings. The accuracy of my words hits her like a slap, and for the first time since I've known her, Serafina looks genuinely uncomfortable. I turn back to Jake, and my voice becomes softer, but no less firm. Son, I need you to understand something important. I didn't spend that money to buy my way into your wedding. I spent it because I love you and wanted to give you something beautiful to start your marriage. But love is supposed to flow both ways. And what I've received from both of you is deception, exclusion, and manipulation. Jake tries to speak, but I hold up my hand to stop him. I'm not finished. I continue. Since you've made it clear that my presence at your wedding would be unwelcome, let me make something equally clear to both of you. You'll have exactly the wedding you planned and exactly the marriage you deserve. But don't expect me to pretend this didn't happen. And don't expect me to be available when you need help with the problems that come after the party ends. The finality in my voice makes them both realize this conversation is ending their relationship with me, not just changing it. As I walk toward their door, Jake jumps up from the couch with panic in his voice. Mom, wait. We can fix this. Maybe we made some mistakes, but we can work it out. You're still my mother, and I still love you. His words carry the desperation of someone who's finally understanding what they're about to lose. But some bridges can't be rebuilt once they've been burned this completely. I pause at their door and look back at my son one last time. Jake, I raised you to be honest, loyal, and grateful for the people who sacrifice for you. The man sitting in this apartment today is none of those things. When you figure out how to be my son again, instead of Serafina's puppet, you know where to find me. The words hang in the air like a final judgment, and I can see them both realize that this isn't just a family argument anymore. It's the end of the relationship they took for granted. 3 days later, I'm tending my garden when my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, comes over with a concerned expression. Helen, I saw some young people taking pictures of your house yesterday. They had professional cameras and were measuring your property line. Is everything okay? Her words send a chill down my spine because I know exactly who would be interested in my property measurements, and it's not anyone with good intentions. That evening, Jake calls me for the first time since our confrontation. His voice sounds hollow and tired, like someone who hasn't been sleeping well. Mom, I need to tell you something about the wedding. I wait silently for him to continue, no longer willing to make this conversation easy for him. It was awful, Mom. Everything went wrong. The air conditioning broke at the community center. Half the guests left early because it was so hot, and the food gave people food poisoning. But what he tells me next makes my blood run cold. Serafina's been acting strange since the wedding. She keeps asking questions about your house, about property values in the neighborhood, about whether you have a will. She even suggested we should move in with you to help take care of you now that you're getting older. The pieces click together in my mind with terrifying clarity. And I realized that this wedding drama was never really about guest lists or family dynamics. I hang up the phone after Jake's confession, my hands trembling as the full scope of Serafina's manipulation becomes clear. This was never about having an intimate wedding or avoiding family drama. It was about isolating me from my son so she could position herself to inherit everything I've worked for my entire life. The excluded mother-in-law was just the first step in a much larger plan, and I've been playing defense when I should have been investigating my opponent. Within an hour, I'm on my computer researching everything I can find about Serafina Miller. What I discover makes my blood turn to ice water in my veins. She's been married twice before, both times to older men with valuable assets. Her first husband died in a suspicious accident, just 18 months after their wedding, leaving her his house and life insurance. Her second husband divorced her when he discovered she'd been forging his signature on financial documents, but not before she'd transferred significant assets into her own name. I print out every article, every court document, every public record I can find. The pattern is clear to anyone willing to look. Serafina targets vulnerable people with assets, isolates them from their support systems, and then systematically takes control of their finances. Jake isn't her husband, he's her entry point into my life and my property. The wedding exclusion was designed to create a rift between us so she could swoop in later as the caring daughter-in-law who's willing to help the lonely old woman. The next morning, I drive to the police station with my folder of evidence. Detective Martinez listens patiently as I explain the situation, occasionally asking clarifying questions about timelines and financial transactions. When I finish, she leans back in her chair with a grim expression. "Mrs. Kang, what you're describing sounds like a pattern we've seen before. Elder fraud is becoming more sophisticated, and targeting family relationships is one of the newest tactics." She takes copies of all my documentation and promises to open an investigation, but warns me that proving intent to commit fraud before any actual crime has occurred is extremely difficult. "The best thing you can do right now is protect yourself financially and document any attempts they make to access your accounts or property." Her words confirm what I already suspected. I'm on my own in this fight, and I need to be smarter than my opponents. I spend the rest of the week consulting with lawyers, financial advisors, and a private investigator who specializes in fraud cases. The picture that emerges is even worse than I imagined. Serafina has been researching my property value, my financial status, and my family history since the day she met Jake. She chose him specifically because he's my only heir, and because she correctly identified me as someone who would be generous with family members. The private investigator, a sharp woman named Carol Stevens, shows me photographs of Serafina meeting with a real estate agent last week, discussing the potential sale value of houses in my neighborhood. "She's been telling people that she and your son are planning to move in with you to provide care as you age," Carol explains. "She's already contacted elder care services about having you evaluated for diminished capacity." The words hit me like a physical assault. Diminished capacity, the legal term, that would allow them to take control of my finances and property while keeping me alive but powerless. It's the perfect crime, because it looks like family members stepping up to help an aging relative. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, all the assets have been transferred and the victim is trapped in the system. That evening, Jake shows up at my door unannounced, looking haggard and confused. "Mom, Serafina says you've been spreading lies about her online and hiring people to follow us around. She wants to file a restraining order against you for harassment." His words confirm that Serafina knows I'm onto her scheme, and she's moving to the next phase of her plan, making me look like a paranoid old woman whose family needs legal protection from her irrational behavior. I invite Jake inside and show him everything I've discovered: the court documents from Serafina's previous marriages, the photos of her meeting with real estate agents, the evidence of her researching elder care laws. I watch his face as he processes the information, seeing his world collapse as he realizes he's been played by a professional manipulator who saw him as nothing more than a useful tool. "She told me you were getting forgetful and that we needed to start thinking about your future care." Jake whispers, his voice breaking. She said excluding you from the wedding was actually protecting you from stress that might make your condition worse. She convinced me that lying to you was an act of love. The devastation in his eyes tells me that he's finally understanding how completely he's been manipulated, but it might be too late to undo the damage. As we sit in my living room surrounded by evidence of Serafina's crimes, I realize that this story isn't over yet. She's made one crucial mistake in her carefully planned scheme. Why she underestimated the intelligence and determination of the elderly woman she chose as her target. Now it's time to show her exactly what happens when you try to steal from someone who spent 72 years learning how to fight for what matters most. But first, I need to save my son from the web of lies that's destroying his life, and I need to do it before Serafina realizes that her perfect plan has been completely exposed.